Anyone that's going to log in a little bit later, they'll have to catch up. First thing I want to do is just point everyone to the file section. Yep, g'day Russell. I'm going to point you towards the file section. So you should be able to open up the little box down under chat, and you'll see there's 3 files in there. The first one is tonight's Getting Groups of Diagnostics. It's the presentation in the PDF format. The second one is a report, and that's the report we talked about last week, the checklist when you talk to the customers and you can actually check it off. I might be able to show you that anyway. And the last one's the flow chart. I probably should hit share, share, and share. They should all be available by now. G'day, Jake, you made it. Here you go, man. All right, now, which button did I press? Screen share. So what I might do is just very quickly, I'm going to share that screen for a minute. Whoa, that looks terrible. All right, let me minimize that. Okay, so this is the first one I'm showing you. This is the diagnosis report, or the report we can use when we're talking to our customers. And we can go through and just quite simply put some details in there and complete the checkboxes for the symptoms. A lot of you might already have these type of forms in your customer toolkit. This is one we developed. There's just some information in there that you might be prompted to ask the customer, and it might help with diagnosis. It's something we can attach to the job card or the RO, the repair order. So I've shared that with you today. The other one we've got is the diagnostic flowchart. And as far as diagnostic flowcharts go, this one's pretty simple. Step 1, understand and verify the customer's concern. Verify that it's a fault, not a feature. Is the vehicle operating designed? If so, that's okay. If it's not, we perform our preliminary checks, verify the facts. This is what we talked about last week. And then from our fact-finding mission, we might do our visual inspection, we do our DTC fault report, we check the symptoms, and we do some test and evaluation. We might then move into our service bulletins. From there, we'll carry out any TSBs that are available or continue our diagnostic. And that could mean, quite simply, looking at whether we're going to diagnose using DTCs or we're going to diagnose via symptoms, or there might be any sort of diagnosis for that vehicle. Last step is the repair and validate. I find this is a great little roadmap for us, just so we don't get lost. Because like we saw last week, it's very, very easy to get lost on the diagnostic path. And this can sort of just keep you on the straight and narrow. And it might be an idea just to sort of go back over it and go, well, what have I missed? What haven't I done? I've done it. I've done the historical and current DTCs. Maybe I should be looking at symptoms or something like that. So I'm sharing this one with you all so you can use that. And the other one is just quite simply the presentation of tonight. Now, let me get my where is my presentation? Here's my presentation. I've lost it. Stop. Start. Here we go. We're back. Excellent. Even technology gets me sometimes. All right, so here we go. So what we're going to look at tonight are, I think, 4 case studies that we've pulled off our records, and things where we've actually had some issues, quite interesting issues, and they're across a range of systems in the vehicle. And they'll cover a few different disciplines. So the idea of these case studies is just to show you that the 7-step diagnostic method that Opus put together actually works. And it's the one we use, so it gets us to the bottom of the problem pretty quickly. So you'll have to bear with me. It's been pretty hot up here the last couple of days, and I'm feeling it. So we'll get through this reasonably quickly tonight. There's another little thing I just want to show you at the end of tonight, and you might have seen it. That was what was up on the screen flashing before, and it's a diagnostic tool, and it's one I use when I'm training people on diagnostics. It's free to use. And I'll share that with you, and it's quite a good one around engine management systems. I quite like it. It's very, very realistic. Again, as we're going through each of these diagnostic scenarios, just pop your your questions in the chat box, and I'll be able to answer them as we go. I know sometimes we like to wait till the end, but I sort of find that I tend to forget the questions and I don't come back to them. So definitely just ask me on the way. All right, so case study number one, it's a BMW. So this particular fault came from Suman in our BMW files. The customer complaint, the engine cranks but won't start. Typical BMW, really. No, BMWs are good. They don't break that often. Unlike Audi, Volkswagen vehicles and Range Rovers and Land Rovers and Volvos. Anything European, really. All right. Customer complaint, engine will crank but not start. Vehicle's an E70, so it's an X5 series with a 3-litre diesel. Year model is, I would say, the 4th month, 2007, not the 40th month. There's the VIN, and it's an automatic transmission. Okay, so again, step number one, if you remember from last week, verify the complaint. And we're going to verify the complaint by either road testing or talking to the customer and just doing some open-ended questions. These are the questions that we have actually asked the customer. Has there recently been any repair work carried out in the vehicle? The customer's answer was only basic maintenance for the last few years. How often does a problem occur? It was originally twice a week, but it's happening more frequently now. So it's one of those intermittent problems that we all love. Does the problem occur when cornering or going over bumps? No, it only occurs on startup of the engine. Does weather have any effect on when the fault occurs? And it doesn't matter if the vehicle's hot or cold or it's raining or dry. Does the car have to be idling, driving reverse, moving forward? These are standard questions we ask. When the car is playing up, it will crank over but not start until we cycle the ignition a few times. So we actually got a little bit more information by using some open-ended questions from our customer, which is kind of a good thing. Now, I don't know if we talked about open and closed questions, but I find with diagnosis it's quite important that we use a lot of open-ended questions. So questions that prompt a detailed response from the customer. Customers that just give us a straight yes, no, they're no help to us at all. We want as much information from that customer as possible because it helps us build the picture of the entire vehicle. All right, so they're the questions we've asked and they're the answers we've gotten. Okay, number two, collect the facts. So when we performed our fact check, we carried out a quick test. Now, in that quick test, we found the EWS, which is the electronic mobilizer, has a fault logged. So this is what we did. We cleared the fault codes, but it came back after a non-start situation. So that basically told us that that fault code definitely relates to the problem. The fault code was something to do with the EWS interface error, and that's related to the customer's complaining. So the fault code was A442 EWS interface error. Now, last week we talked about BMW and how BMW used some different language, so does Volkswagen, so does Mercedes. And if I was to see that, I wouldn't have a clue what EWS interface error means. But luckily, I have a Suman in the box, and I can let him out whenever I need him. Okay, so here's our quick test. So we're going to have a bit of a look at it. There's our details. Battery voltage wasn't the best at this time, 11.8 volts. Footwell module, we got some brake lights out, brake lights, faulty, drive mirror. None of those faults are going to stop it from starting. Air conditioning, nothing much going on there. Trailer module, flashing right broken lamp, or well, that's not going to stop it starting. Dynamic stability control, the rain light sensor. This is pretty much a BMW X5, but none of these early ones is going to stop the car from starting. Supply was switched off, terminal 30, glow plug activation, and there's our EWS error, and this has come out of our DME. So the engine control module is the one that's reported this. It's reported that possibly it can't interface or it can't talk to the EWS or the immobilizer module. And that should be starting to ring alarm bells with a car that won't start. So we've interpreted the fault report. We've had a bit of a look. Some tests and evaluation. So initially we might do some quick tests just to have a look and see if the EWS is talking to the engine control module. And in this case, what we've done, we've just plugged the scope in, because if we have a look here, right, so here's our CAS, which is our, oops, let me just turn that off, 809. Not sure who that is, but I can't answer the phone during it's a fly in here, during a webinar. All right, so our CAS module, which holds the immobiliser system. So CAS for BMW speak is car access system. All right, so that's what enables us to get into the car. It also has a lot of the body control systems on it. It's connected via a comms line via one wire, and that should tell us that it's using a master-slave type system or a serial data line. More than likely some sort of LIN network or low-speed communication protocols. So just looking at that, we should be able to fairly easily back probe one of those wires with the scope and just see if there's any communication there. And just see if there's any communication on that line. So that would be a pretty quick test for us. All right, the next thing we should have a look at, of course, once we've done this particular test, we can probably determine whether we need to start looking at a problem in the CAS module or a problem in the DME. But we can see on the circuit diagram that that's the EWS transmission line. So the next thing on our 7 steps is we really need to be looking for technical resources before we go replacing components or really breaking into harnesses looking for problems. We should be looking at some technical resources just to see if there's anything quick or common that we should be looking for as well. Now, in this instance, when this fault went to Suman on this particular car, he gave the customer some of the circuit diagram to do the basic checks. And while the customer was doing that, Suman was looking up TSB, technical service bulletins, or any common problems that might be going on. Now, again, Suman's our BMW support guy. So there was a TSB on this, and if we have a look up here, engine stalling, hard starting, or lack of power, that could be one of the symptoms. Or there's sporadically no engine start. So BMW speak, sporadically, intermittently, no engine start. Possibly I can't read what the rest of that is, it's been cut off. The vehicle's in a status terminal R, pressing the clutch, the vehicle's actuation, start, stop, status performance, the customer must attach something. So there could be a fault there. Engine lost power, pulled over. Check vehicle histories, we've been through that. And we've had a bit of a look, there's no actual open campaigns. And open campaigns could be vehicle recalls or service campaigns where the vehicle does need to go back to the dealer. Just get to my next slide here. So I believe, what we can't actually see here, I don't believe that's been pasted in here properly. There is a TSB that talks about an intermittent no start, and it does talk about this circuit diagram here. It does talk about information exchange across this diagram. So what they've done, they've put the oscilloscope on this. Now, they've done a trace, and the scope is just a nice, simple back probe on this wire, if you can all see my mouse here. We've just back probed the CAS or the DME. The DME is probably easier to get to on the X5, and back probe at pin 10. Then we've started the vehicle. Now, when the engine was starting, that's the signal we're getting from the DME. Now, these are screen captures taken by the workshop that had the problem. They sent it to Suman. So looking at that, and I didn't do this job, but I'm looking at that now and I'm going, yep, that's a nice serial data line. It's not a high-grade scope, but in this case, it doesn't really have to be. I'm looking at a nice square wave on and off. Now, regardless of what sort of data that is, serial data or what the message is there, it's a clean on and off signal. And that's what I would expect on any serial line, on any single line. They repeated the test, and when the car didn't start, this is the signal they got. So that's when it was cranking and not starting. Now, to me, that's pretty conclusive that there's an issue happening there. There's a breakdown in communication. And that's simply back probed using the scope. Now, Suman actually found a TSB on this, and this fault's been found a few times. And it talks about a little bit of water entry into the CAS module. And it gets a little bit of water, causes a little bit of corrosion, and every now and again, the CAS sends a faulty transmission, sends a faulty start signal. So it's basically an okay to start signal. Oh, goodness, there's a fly in here bothering me. So when we put the key in the ignition, the key reader reads the key broadcasts its transponder message. That goes to the immobiliser. The immobiliser identifies it, says, yes, we're good to go. The immobiliser then sends a signal down to the DME going, you're okay to start. Engine control module then engages the start relay and off we go. So there's a whole lot happening between key in, twist, and vehicle start. In this particular case, it was being interrupted between the CAS and the DME simply by moisture entry. And you can see on the picture there, that's where the corrosion was attacking the circuit board. Well, that's the outside of the module, but I think the inside of the module's up here, and I don't think you can quite see it that well. So that's the intermittent fault in this particular thing. So the test and evaluation, we found the fault, we followed out whatever Suman told us was in that TSB, and then we repeat the test. When we replaced the CAS module on this vehicle, we had to program the we had to program the new module, and this is step number 6, initialize and adaptation. So with BMWs, DME, not the CAS, replace the DME. We've got to put we've got to reprogram it, and the beauty with BMW, we've got complete program access on all their modules. So we go into CIP, we follow the instructions, and we put the new software in. Now, this particular thing, there's step number 7, confirm the repair. The customers, or the workshop in this case, they kept the vehicle for a further 5 days. They did cold starts every day. The fault didn't come back. And they were starting it 3 times a day. So they carried out a quick test at the end, and again, there was no EWS fault log. So that was pretty conclusive that that is the fault. So what's interesting about that is there's quite a large system going on with this BMW at the start. And unless you're intimately familiar with a BMW X5 and how the system works, finding that fault's probably going to be a little bit difficult without a little bit of help from a technical resource of some description, whether it's a wiring diagram, a campaign, or a TSB. And I really like to keep using the master techs that we have down in Melbourne. Just the simple fact that they will see 20 to 30 cases a day. The cases might be similar or the cases might be different, but they see that many a day for 365 days a year. It means they're going to get a big reservoir of faults. So when you do contact them for a little bit of help, they've got a massive data bank that they can just search via symptoms, search via DTC, and they can tell you pretty much straight away what you should be looking for. And in this case, for this particular customer, it did make all the difference. All right, step 7, confirm the repair. Case study number 2, this was from Rich's files, our VAG master tech. So the customer complaint, the air conditioning is not getting cold. So it's not as glamorous as a engine not start problem, but you know what? An AC not getting cold is pretty damned important in Australia, especially this time of year. It's starting to get damn hot up here. So air conditioning is really important. unless you're living in Melbourne right now, where they're getting rain and horrible weather. Well, you're not allowed to go outside in Melbourne anyway, or Victoria. Air conditioning in your vehicle is pretty up there with a list of top priorities. So this particular fault, air conditioning is not getting cold. The vehicle's an A4 and A5, 2008 model. There's the VIN for this particular vehicle, and it's an automatic transmission. Okay, so step one, verify the complaint. Does the air conditioning get cold when all the parameters are set? No, it only blows warm air. Has there recently been any repair work carried on the vehicle? Again, basic maintenance over the last few years. How often does the problem occur? All the time. Does the weather have any effect when the fault occurs? When it's warm and the air conditioner is needed to cool the vehicle, well, that's a given. So we've talked to the customer, and we're probably going to get in and do a quick test on the vehicle. We found fault codes logged in the air conditioning and central electronics control module relating to air conditioning. Air conditioning is pretty important to me because I think there's a lot of misdiagnosis around it. And for anyone that does AC and does AC on a regular basis, you might be getting a lot of jobs from other workshops where they've tried something or replaced something and hasn't fixed it. And you get it in and you follow some simple steps and you can find the problem pretty quickly. But a lot of the time, people tend to just like gas and go air conditioning systems. Not getting cold, put gas in it, see you later, see if it fixes it. There's a local spare parts shop where I am that advertises top up your aircon system. Drive in, top it up for $99. And for those of us that are in the trade and doing it properly, we know that that's probably a little bit illegal according to Arctic and our standards that we have to follow. So to see that, I get a bit annoyed, and I really like the diagnosis of an air conditioning system to be done properly. So here we go. We've carried out collecting the facts. We've done a quick test, and we've got some fault codes there. So we should have a look and see what they are. Okay, so here's the quick test report. So hopefully you can actually see this, but electronics central electrics module. So that's basically a body control module. Fault, there's a present fault, local data bus 3 electrical fault in circuit. Now, Rich has been kind enough to tell us that that's actually a LIN bus fault code, which is really interesting. There's also an air quality sensor code, no signal or a sporadic communication fault from our air quality sensor. And that would be our CO2 sensor in this vehicle. CO2 sensors aren't that popular on Australian-made cars, but German vehicles or European vehicles, they are, and they've been around for a long time. We've also got both pressure and quality air sensors. So there's a pressure sensor code, refrigerant pressure, temperature sender, no signal, communication sporadic, intermittent problem there. And there's our air quality sensor, implausible signal, intermittent. So it's quite interesting. There's quite a lot happening around those sensors. And if I sort of saw that, if I saw the pressure sensor code by itself, I might be guided to check pressure in the system with a set of manual gauges, or put the scan tool in and look at the pressure values on the system just to see if there is refrigerant in the system. That's if I was just looking at a pressure one, but it's a communication fault. It's not a low pressure code. It's not a high pressure code. It's some sort of communication fault. And this one over here is an implausible signal as well. So in this particular case, they cleared the codes and then turned the system back on. The faults came straight back, and that tells us it's a hard fault. It also told us, because they were sort of the comms fault, it's an electrical fault, so we didn't need to put the pressure gauges on or check the charge in the system. So we'll quickly look at the next page. So at this point, we've proved that the fault's there. We've proved it's there all the time. We proved it's happening right now. Time for TSBs. So we're over here, technical service information. Air conditioning doesn't work, sometimes sporadic. No bus, something or other, and battery flat. No bus, I can't read that. Customer complaint workshop findings. I hope you guys can read this better than me, or I don't have my glasses on. But it does look like their workshop findings in that TSB are very, very similar to what we're looking at. Production change, technical background, prepare this, Does not work. I'm just going to have to open this on my other screen to make it a little bit bigger. I do apologise, but this is what happens when you start getting a bit older. I really don't like it, and I'm sure a lot of you can agree with me. I'll just get this up on my other screen so it's a little bit bigger for me. Oh, that's good. I can actually see that now. I'm sure if you download this, you can. Statement: windscreen intermittently steams up, air conditioning doesn't work. Sometimes it's sporadic. Occasionally the vehicle doesn't start. That's interesting. Entry and air conditioning and heating control, address code 08 or in power system. This is why I think you need a Volkswagen tech to tell you what's going on with this. Technical background. Pressure sensor, G395, radio 5, air conditioning doesn't work. Well, they're the fault codes we've got. Pressure sensor displays wrong or implausible values. Because of wrong signal processing, the pressure sensor, there is no bus silence, and therefore the battery is being discharged. Oh, so they've got a battery going for it as well. So technical background. The LIN cable of the power control system to the pressure sensor has been disrupted. Very, very interesting. The LIN cable, number 6, from the air conditioning control unit, J301, to pressure sensor, G395, is disrupted. Affects only A3 to 8VC technical bulletin, whatever that is. That's quite interesting. Sorry, lost audio. All right, is that good now, Jake? We'll just make sure you've still got that before I go on. Also, video, not reconnecting. Has anyone else lost audio or video, or is it just Jake? Also, video not reconnecting. Pat, have you still got video? I'll just wait. Oh, all good now, Jake? All right. Pat, all good? Okay. Right, so just reading what they got there, and I think when you open your PDF, it'll actually be a bit clearer for you. Point number 6 says the LIN cable from the control unit is disrupted. So in German speak, the LIN cable is probably broken. So it's using a communication message from the air quality sensor and the air compressor sensor back to the control module. If we have a look here, it's quite interesting. So LIN, so it's local interconnect network, master slave system. And they both sort of come up to this T piece and then across there. Now, if we lost communications, which according to the TSB we did, there might be a problem in this circuit. Now, it looks here, production change. They've actually improved the pressure sensor, optimized production, various measures, supplier, optimized wiring loom. So they've made a change to the wiring loom from a particular vehicle onwards. And that sort of corresponds with our fault in this vehicle. Okay, so we move on to step number 6, our wiring and component test. And looking at what we've got here, there is an actual break. So this is up behind the inner guard. So if you look up beside where the wiring harness comes through the guard, in behind we take the plastic shield off the wheel arch. There's a photo there of the harness, and we've taken the insulation off the harness. And you actually see in the top left-hand corner, here's our twisted pair. So here's our comms line, and there's a broken wire sitting inside there. So that might be making contact, not making contact. Let me just open this up a little bit here on my picture, just so I can see a little bit better. Okay, so it says there, if the LIN cable is disrupted around the grommet in illustration A, repair it with another section of wire. Cut off the cable. If the new cable is to be routed to the passenger compartment, routed as follows. It's just showing us where, on this lower picture, the grommet, to run the new cable. So there is a TSB on this thing. It actually points to exactly what we're looking for. All right, repair initialize. Okay, repair damaged wire using the correct heat and crimp. Connectors do not solder. Interesting that they want us to do that. But then again, manufacturers are telling us not to solder wires because apparently we can't do it properly. We can't do it to their standard. Erase fault codes, make sure don't return. Test the air conditioning now it gets cold. Now, again, like any fault code, make sure you replicate the conditions for setting the code. Otherwise, we're doing an injustice on the customer. All right, that's good. Okay, next one we're going to quickly look at, 7:30. We're actually on fire tonight. How long would they have taken to find the break in the wire? Looms difficult. Yeah, it could have taken them a really long time, Jake. But luckily, with the TSB or the technical service bulletin there, one person had to find it, maybe two people had to find it, and they went, this could be a common problem. So they've put the tech service bulletin or the technical service bulletin together to help out anyone else that comes along. And this is why we keep stressing over and over and over, you need good access to wiring diagrams and you need access to TSBs whenever you're doing diagnostics. Look, I imagine to find the break in that wire could have been hard, especially when you look back at this picture. I'll get back a bit to where it was, and that's up in the inner guard. So that's going to be an absolute nightmare to find. I could find it pretty quickly, I'd imagine, going down from the, if I come back to my circuit diagram here, come down my air quality sensor and just back probe with the scope there, back probe with the scope there, then come back up to my air conditioning module and back probe there. And I can tell you there's a break in there. But finding the actual break and repairing it, yeah. Unless I had that particular help, it could take hours and hours and hours. And that's hours of diagnostic time. Whether you can charge that out or not, I don't know. A lot of the time, the customer's not going to want to pay you to find that broken wire. But if you didn't have that access to a technical service bulletin to show you exactly where the break occurs, and you found an open circuit between the two, you could very nearly repair it by replacing the wire and just running an external wire through. It is LIN, so it's low speed. It's not important information. Again, it's convenience systems. It's no different to a door lock. You can nearly run a secondary wire from the climate control module plug all the way through to the pressure sensor. That would probably be quicker than actually hunting down or undoing the harness and looking for the break yourself. But that's what I mean. It's so helpful to have a technical service bulletin to show you right where the problem occurs, especially if the faults match your symptoms. And the time it takes to read a tech service bulletin isn't long. Okay, jump off the Euros for a minute. Let's look at GM Holden. Yay, anyone that works on Captivas? This isn't a Captiva, thank goodness, although it could be. Okay, customer complaint on this particular one. Now, I know this one because I've seen this a couple of times, although it's not that common. So hopefully, if you come across it, it might make life a little bit easy for you. So the customer complained on this particular vehicle, during a cold start, the engine will misfire and or have a rough idle. The malfunction indicator lamp might be illuminated. The condition goes away after the engine warms up. So the particular vehicle I found it on was a VF Commodore, but it occurs on any engine that has an LFX V6 or LLT V6, and that could be Captiva. Keep your eyes open for that one. LFX could be Series 2 VE as well. All right, verify the fault. Does the engine run rough on a cold start? Yes, after it's sat overnight, so it must be cold. Has there been any repair work carried out on the vehicle? Only basic maintenance and servicing for the last couple of years. How often does a problem occur? When the vehicle is left sitting for a few days and has not been started. Does weather have any effect on when the fault occurs? No. So the one I looked at, it would fault overnight. As long as I left the car overnight, it would start up and run rough. If I left the car for 3 hours, it would run fine. If I left it for 4 hours, it would run fine. I had to leave it overnight to get really, really cold. And it was in Canberra, so, you know, it did get cooled off quite a lot. Okay, collecting the facts and interpreting the fault report. So carried out a quick test on this vehicle. We found some fault code logs in the engine control module, and the fault code was P0300. Cleared the fault code, the vehicle started okay. The fault returned on the third morning. Vehicle ran rough for a minute, then went well. The code came back. Now, for anyone that's familiar with the DTC 300, it's a misfire code, a random misfire code. Now, the fact that it's a V6 Holden motor, that could mean absolutely anything, especially if it's in a Captiva. It could mean anything from cam timing to sludging to coils to plugs to just it's had a bad day and it just felt like misfiring. So what do we do next? Okay, test and evaluation. Here's our quick test. Here's our fault report come back. Oh, here's our DTC, random misfire detected. We've proved it's there. We could spend, because this is a GM vehicle, we could spend quite a few hours, burning hours here, looking for problems that might cause that. So pulling coil packs off, testing coil packs, pulling plugs out, pulling valve covers off, hooking our scope up, checking cam timing, checking to see if the cat converters have collapsed and, blocking one of the pipes. Guess what? It happens on both Commodores and Captivas. In this particular instance, the first one I came across that we looked at, we actually did all that and we spent hours and hours and hours looking for the fault. But then some bright spark I was working with said, I wonder if there's a TSB on this. So we looked it up and wouldn't you believe it, here it is. And it was exactly what we're up against. So in this particular case, when I first did it, I looked at the TSB long after I'd spent hours on the car. Not the right thing to do, but that's what I did in this instance. So the TSB, I'll just read this out. Some customers may complain that during a cold start, the engine will misfire and have a rough idle. The mill may be illuminated. They may also comment that the condition goes away after the engine warms up. The tech may observe on a scan tool. Guess what? We did all that. We found it. The cause, a possible engine cylinder block porosity causing a pinhole at the liner's deck face casting area, allowing engine coolant to leak into the affected cylinder. The technician may observe on a scan tool engine misfire detected in there. So how the hell are you ever going to find that? You're going to spend hours and hours and hours looking. Now, they've got, GM have a process for actually finding it. And I'll just go to my next slide here. All right. Just skip past that. I just want to see if they've got, yep. So I'll show you this one quickly. That's the little pinhole. And that's actually a lot larger. That's after it's been scratched out. And you can see where the pinhole is. It's right up above the top ring land, all right? So the piston ring doesn't actually get this high up. Now, it only occurs when the engine sits overnight. So what that's actually meaning is that when the engine's heating up, that pinhole's closing and we're not getting a leak there. So it's only when everything cools right down and the pressure's still fairly high that the piston sort of shrinks away. And we've still got radiator pressure in the system. That's when the coolant sort of just spills out into here and it misfired a little bit. Now, I know you're probably thinking, why not do a TK test on it? We did a TK test on it and it doesn't show up because the leak was so minor. There was just enough moisture in there to stop the spark plug from firing, just enough. There was no green tinge on the plugs. There was absolutely nothing to indicate the leaking head gasket. Once we saw this TSB, we went, aha, well, that's interesting. Popped the head off and there it was. So I've only seen this twice. A lot of other dealers have seen it a few times. So the problem exists. It is out there. Now, I want to point this one out that you can burn a lot of hours finding this, or you can grab the TSB and just check. Now, the easiest way the GM came up with to find this problem was to put some dye in the cooling system, run the engine, get it to misfire overnight, then pull the spark plug out and put an ultraviolet light down inside the spark plug hole. And the dye showed up pretty readily inside there, it stained it. So, and that proved it had this little pinhole on the inside. We actually found a little bit of a different way to do it, and it was very, very accurate. And I did this over at Bathurst when we had our national training seminar at Christmas. And they had a Commodore there that had a little bit of a miss. And we put the picoscope onto it, and we put this first look sensor onto it as well. Now, what was so clever about it, and I think it was an American guy that actually told me about this, this first look sensor is fairly sensitive to pressure changes. So this end of the hose that we normally poke down the dipstick or up the exhaust or in the intake manifold, all we attached to that was your radiator pressure testing cap. So you know all those, the radiator pressure testers that have got the male fitting on the end, and then you have like a quick connect fitting and we pump the pressure through it. We put that on and then just hose clamp this rubber hose onto it. Then we crank the engine. We had to play with some of our voltage settings just to get a baseline. But what we actually found first, we ended up with all these little ripples along here. And these little ripples are the water pump impeller. As the impeller spins around and the pressure just changes minutely, this first look sensor picked up the pressure change. Every now and again, we get this massive pulse in the system. Every now and again, we get this pulse. So what we did was we put a second channel on the scope, connected it to number one coil just so we had a cylinder one sync, and then we could actually work out where that was occurring in the cycle and how close to cylinder number one it was. So we could actually see these normal pulses from the water pump there. Once we had a number one sync there, it was quite easy to drag some 300 or some degree rulers across on the scope. And we could pinpoint that this cylinder head gasket was leaking on cylinder number 5, or it had a pressure leak into cylinder number 5 because their cylinder pressure went up, and it went up quite dramatically. Not enough to cause overheating at that point, but it was definitely starting to leak, and we found it. And that was on an older VZ Commodore, I think, with the Allotech motor. So it might not have been the same problem, but the principle of testing was actually quite good. Now, I'd probably use that test over the dye method just because it's much, much quicker. And if I'm getting a pressure change into the cylinder because of that pinhole, right, and that's an absolute pinhole, it might be enough to just stop the spark plug momentarily, but not enough to cause overheating issues. The first look sensor will pick it up. It'll pick up that pressure change very, very quickly. And I don't know if anyone else has actually done that before. Pat, I know you play with the scope quite a lot, and I don't know if you've ever done that test, but it is a really, really good one. So keep your eyes open for that one. That's a TSB that's out there now, random misfire. All right, last case study, number 4, Toyota. So we'll pick another Australian vehicle, which is pretty good. Just make sure I click the wrong buttons here. All right, case study on a Toyota. All right, this one came out of the UK, but guess what? We get the same vehicles here. Customer complaint, power loss while driving, only in cold conditions. So that's probably never going to happen up where I am, but it'll definitely happen down around Dubbo in winter. It'll happen around Canberra and anywhere south of the border. Power loss while driving, cold conditions only, the mill illuminates. So it's a Prado 2012 model, and it can happen to auto or manual vehicle. All right, let's have a quick look. Verify the fault. Does the engine lose power while driving? Yes. It lost power at normal operating temperature after it completed a full drive cycle. That's interesting. Has there been any other repair work carried out in the vehicle? Only basic maintenance and servicing. It's a Toyota. Not much is going to go wrong with them. How often does a problem occur? It's intermittent. We all love those ones. Does weather have any effect when the fault occurs? Yes. Must be a cold morning start or cold driving conditions. That's quite interesting. All right. So we verify the fault. We go for a drive, and it loses power on us. All right, let's collect the facts. Carried out a quick test. Found fault codes logged in the engine control module, and the fault code is DTC P0488 and EGR code. Now, this is a hard fault code, being Toyota. You can clear it, but the vehicle returns as soon as the vehicle loses power after that first drive cycle. Now, being a Toyota, now, was this a diesel engine? Let me just check. I think it was, wasn't it? Prado, oh, we don't know. I think it might be a diesel engine. Well, EGR fault. Pretty common in cars these days that EGRs fail. Would the EGR cause it to lose power? Yeah, it could. EGR jams open, the thing will lose power. Basically because the airflow meter is reporting basically unmetered air going into the engine when it's being not commanded. Engine control unit might be commanding the EGR close. The EGR can't close, keeps getting exhaust gases in, which means we're not getting as much fresh air flow through the airflow meter. So EGR could be at fault here. If this was a Triton or a Colorado or an old Rodeo or something, you'd probably throw an EGR valve at this straight away if you had that fault code, or if it was a position sensor code. They're not uncommon. Those Denso units do fail. All right, let's collect the facts and interpret the fault report. Okay, we perform a quick test. Here's our DTC's EGR throttle control 1 circuit range performance code. Okay, does anyone remember when I was talking about performance codes last week? Range performance. This may be a cause for replacement EGR being a performance code. Performance codes are quite interesting because a performance code is generally caused not by an electrical fault. So if we had a DTC relating as an electrical fault, like a solenoid failure or something like that, we'd get a voltage high or a voltage low or a voltage intermittent type fault code. Performance codes are generally logged due to mechanical faults. So EGR sticking, we get a performance code. If we're talking about crankshaft position sensors or wheel speed sensors, we're talking about the gap between the sensor and the tone wheel being excessive or too small. That would cause a performance code. Or the crankshaft moving under thrust because their thrust bearings have worn out. So the crankshaft moves away from the crankshaft sensor. That would be a performance code. So something like this, we're looking at it, whenever we see performance code, we're probably starting to think there's a manual problem here. So it could physically be a blocked up valve. And if you didn't know better, you probably would put an EGR on this. But be careful in this instance because there is a technical service bulletin on this particular vehicle. Component wiring module test. All right, so what we'd actually do in the component wiring module test, we would, it's a shame there's no image on there, but let's use our imaginations and let's imagine that we've got our scan tool plugged into this vehicle and we're pressing the button to command the EGR open and closed. All right, and the physical test for that is to either use our scope on the sensor and actually look at the sensor, the values of the sensor moving open and closed, or physically pop the pipe off the EGR or pop the EGR off the manifold and physically look at it and see if it opens and closes. That would be the test for this particular fault. If it doesn't move or there's something going wrong or there's just something not happening that should be, we should be looking at TSBs for this particular vehicle. So there's the TSB on here. Now I'm just going to get my one up so I can actually read it again. Make it a little bit larger for me. Here we go. I've got to keep looking away, I'm sorry. Okay, so there's a TSB, and this TSB comes from the AutoLogic guided data. So it is the diesel, the 1KD FTV engine, which is a pretty popular 4-cylinder diesel motor. So when we put that fault code in, it comes up with this TSB. And the symptom says, this only applies to Euro 4 vehicles. Okay, that's us. A power loss, fault code, P0488 EGR throttle control 1 circuit range performance. If I just quickly go back, that's the code we've got. Conditions when symptom appears, and it appears in cold engines. Conditions when symptom appears, loses power. There we go. So there's a TSB for it. That's excellent. So before we replace that EGR, let's look at the cause. And if anyone can see the actual cause here, which I can see it on my screen, engine control unit faulty software. Solution: update the ECM or the ECU software. Diagnostic tool must be used for this operation. So if we were to have replaced the EGR valve on this car, cleared the code, gone for a drive, and it was a warm day and we couldn't replicate it, we'd assume we fixed the job. We would have failed because the car would come back on a tow truck maybe, or driven back by an irate customer because the fault was still there. So the importance of finding information and looking at a TSB it's right up there with cleanliness is next to godliness, or measure twice, cut once, or any of the other proverbs that your old master techs or old bosses that you did your apprenticeships under would have told you about. So the big one from this is check for TSBs, because we might have saved the workshop quite a few $100s and quite a few hours by simply reading that TSB and then updating the software in the ECM. And that would have fixed this vehicle. So diagnostics can be very tricky. And the idea of each of these cases or faults that have occurred in vehicles that we've shown you is a simple fact that the diagnostic path really should be the same in each one. And as long as you follow each of those steps, you should come to some sort of answer. Sometimes they're going to be definitely harder than others. Sometimes they'll be fairly easy. But if you don't have the technical information you need, you're really only doing half the job. And looking at this Toyota one, and I remember reading the case that came through from AutoLogic, they'd actually replaced, the workshop in the UK had replaced the EGR, not once but twice, because obviously the first time the EGR was replaced, it was faulty. And a simple TSB check, you know, even after the first one they put on, going, oh, hang on, that didn't work. Maybe we should need to look at this more. It's like the old oxygen sensor faults. I don't know how many times I've seen, back when I was working for GM, I got shown a job card. Could have tested the EGR by sending an external signal to see if it moves all the way in it. Yeah, exactly. Like we said, using the scan tool to drive it and actually have a look. But what was interesting, the fault only occurred in really cold conditions. So very possibly when we did that, Jake, we might have been testing it, you know, mid-morning and going, yep, by the time we got the EGR out, it's warmed up a little bit, the ECM's warmed up a little bit, whatever's going on inside, the temperature values have changed, and we're pressing the buttons on the scan tool and it's actually working. So this could be one of those ones where we've actually followed the diagnostic path. We've tested it there. Yeah, it's okay. It's logging the fault code for some reason. So yeah, but I would definitely agree with you. I would 100% do that. But information, component wiring module test, repair initialization, adaptation, then confirm the repair. So this particular one, we must put software in the car, go for a drive, try and replicate the fault, test it on a cold day. Again, if it only happens when it's cold in Australia, you're probably only going to see this fault 6 months of the year in most of Australia. You're not going to see it the rest of the year. It's just not UK weather over here, unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say. All right, so they're the case studies. They're the 4 case studies we've had a look at. What I want to do quickly now, just while we've got, I'm actually on time tonight. Awesome. What I'm going to do now is quickly share my screen, and I'm going to get over to this diagnostic scenario. Oh, God. Okay. Let me open that back up. There we go. So maximize. All right, so this particular bit of software, I've been using this for a while now when I do some diagnostics training or electrical training. It's not the real thing, but it's very, very close. And it's great for getting your workshop juniors or even brushing up your own skills. I've actually been trying to beat the system on here over and over and over. And it's basically like a game for us. And being technicians, we're generally competitive people, and we like to find out what the problem is, and we like to beat everyone else at it. We like to be the best. When you log on to this and you put your details in, they do actually score you. You do get points for following procedures. And the procedures are, guess what, the same ones that we follow. The only additional ones on here are complete the job card at the end of the day, which is really important if you want to get paid. So you can see up here, this is the address, Electude Simulator. It's done by a company, Electude, that does a lot of training material. So we'll just very quickly, we'll spend the last few minutes having a quick look at this. The engine does not run. Fill out the repair order when you're finished. Exit the simulator by clicking over here. All right, there's our work order, aero job card. So the first thing we're going to do is we've got to get the instrument panel up. This one here is our accelerator pedal, and here's our key. Just make sure I've got a bit of volume on here. I don't know whether you'll hear this, but I want you to watch the tacho. So I'm going to move the key through, going to crank the engine. All right, cranking, 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 and nothing. Give it another go. Can you call me the next few days when you get a minute? Will do, Pat. Will do, absolutely. So it's cranking and not running. So to me, that is confirming the fault. The customer said it hasn't started. We've tried it. We've confirmed the fault. The very next thing we should do on our diagnostic checklist is check the facts, right? And our facts in this case are going to be doing a quick test report. So I strongly suggest everyone has a bit of a go at this when you get a chance, because it is a lot of fun, and it's something you can get your juniors involved with as well, especially if they're new to the trade, whether you've got apprentices or not, but you'll definitely have some young people in the workshop. We just quickly go through and identify the vehicle, and this would be an auto detect in our world. Now we're going to have a look at all fault codes. Select a fault code and look at communication not possible. Oh, brilliant. One of the best ones out there. The gateway module has lost communication with the transmission control module. Yay, a communication fault. So from here, we could be going absolutely anywhere. What I would be doing at this point, some preliminary tests. I'd actually be possibly getting the scope out, which we've got an oscilloscope somewhere here. We've got a breakout box. There's our scope, there's our breakout box. And we can probably, I have to put this one away. I don't know where my breakout box got to. Maybe I've got to put this one away first. I'd probably be having a quick look just to see if there is any communication on the network. And that's just building up a few more facts. From that point on, I'm going to go and have a look at some TSBs, and I'm going to see if anything relates to this particular vehicle in the way of communication faults. If there's a TSB there, I'll follow it. If not, I'll go back to symptom diagnostics, as we saw in our flowchart. I recommend having a crack at this. It is free. We're in no way associated with Electude. It's just something that I've used that I find is very, very good for the brain at the end of the day. Although you might come home from work and go, you know what, I don't want anything to do with cars. But you might have some days where you've got a bit of time and you want to challenge yourself. Jump on it, have a go, see if you can beat my score. Shouldn't be too hard, because I always forget to do something in there and I lose. All right, so wrapping up our evening quickly. It's now 8 o'clock. We've been on here for an hour. We've had a look at 4 diagnostic scenarios. We followed the same process, and each of those scenarios have actually happened, and they've come from the AutoLogic files. Suman and Rich were responsible for 2 of those. I was responsible for 1, and we got the other one out of the UK. Although I have been told that that same problem affects vehicles here, although again, not in the warmer areas. So if there's any questions about what we've talked about, what's the web link? It is simulator.electude.com. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy that, Jake, Control-C. I'm going to put it in the chat box. And I'm going to put it up there. So you guys can copy that. No worries, Pat. I will call you in the next few days. Matt's got a surprise for you coming in the mail, I believe, in the next few days. All right. So if we've got any questions on what we've looked at tonight and some of those issues, there are only 4 of the several thousands of cases that we've got in AutoLogic. And our guys can access those cases over and over as many times they want just by doing simple search criteria. And the great thing about it is that it's open to you. If you're a subscriber to AutoLogic, you got one of our tools. It's just a matter of pressing the support button on the tool or the app on your phone, which I'll just show you because I used this the first time the other day. Okay, there's my phone, and you can see in the top corner there's an AutoLogic app. I'm going to press that. I'll hold this up. And there we go. We can create a support case using the phone. And I find this really handy because someone might be using the scan tool, or the scan tool I'm using isn't an AutoLogic scan tool, it's another one, but I can log a support request using that app. All the information's there. Again, because it's a phone, I can take photos. If I'm using a snap-on tool, I can take a photo of the DTCs, attach it to the support request and send it off. It's actually a very quick way to get your tech staff asking for help. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help because these days you can't know everything. I ask for help all the time, and it makes you feel a lot better at the end of the day when you can fix a problem quickly and efficiently because someone else might have seen the problem, or there is a published technical service bulletin on that problem that you can follow. All right, so I'm going to wrap up. If there's any more questions, I'll hang around for another 10 minutes just to answer those. Otherwise, I hope you got a little bit out of tonight. Over the 2 nights, there's quite a lot of information. I believe next Wednesday night, we're going to look at some Picoscope software. Again, very beginner stuff, and looking at the software and looking at the navigation and what the Picoscope can do. And over the next however many weeks from now until Christmas, every Wednesday night at this time, we will have a training module up and running. It'll be myself, it'll be one of the tech support guys, it might even be Matt. And again, it'll be a system-based. It might be on a VAG, it might be on a Mercedes vehicle, BMW. We've got one on JLR vehicles. We've got one on select catalyst reduction, which is a Volkswagen system. And we've got quite a smattering or spattering of oscilloscope diagnostics all the way through. All right, so I hope you enjoyed tonight. Again, if there's any questions, I'll sit here. I will turn my camera off because, you know, I don't need you to look at my fried face at the end of the day. And I'll answer the best I can. All right, thank you.